Okay, my clock says it's time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the JMAP session at this virtual IETF111 in lovely San Francisco, where it's sunny and nice, no doubt, without us.
It is.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, without me anyway, which is the only person that really matters, right? So, as always,
Murray can confirm.
he's no Murray. Yes. Did you have a thing to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to confirm it's nice here right now.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad for you. It's actually not too horrible here in Melbourne today either. I'm looking forward to going outside in a couple of hours and getting some fresh air, but it's certainly not warm. All right. As always, this is under the Notewell. The JMAP working group's been going for a while now, so I think everyone here is familiar with the Notewell. If you're not, please do familiarize yourself with it. These are the conditions under which we're working. You can find it online, or you can read these slides slightly less fuzzy by downloading them yourself. This is the rough agenda of what we are thinking of working through today, starting with drafts that address core. I have my JMAP Blob Draft to talk about briefly. Alexi's JMAP SMIME draft, he doesn't have slides for, and unfortunately he's not able to join us today because he has a conflict. He is chairing another working group at the same time. So we're not going to do much other than saying it exists, please read it. Then we'll talk about the calendar drafts, the contact and vCard relationship drafts. I have thrown in the discussion topic of the large email problem that I brought up at dispatch on Monday, basically because we had a whole stack of time. It turns out we probably won't use the full 2 hours, so this is quite padded. If you have any other business, or if you'd like to do some agenda bashing before we even start, please do pop in now. Quite happy to rearrange this agenda. So I'll give people a second to pop in the queue if you want. Neil, go for it.
Just a tiny thing. There have been some errata for the core spec, and I was just wondering, do they need to be approved, or do they kind of automatically get approved because they were submitted by one of the editors? Because I submitted them in the end. I don't know. I just wanted to raise that because I wasn't sure if we should be doing anything with those or whether that's all done.
I will check up on that. Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess we should start with the blob. Do you want to pop yourself out of the queue, Neil? Cool. I can kick you off as well, but you know. All right. So the blob draft, I have uploaded an adopted version of it since it went through its call for adoption. The draft has concatenation support added to it, so you can concatenate parts of blobs, similar to how IMAP concatenation works. You can specify a blob ID and a range of bytes within that blob, or octets, as specs like to say, and then have those concatenated together to produce a single file, which allows you to save uploading data that you already have in various ways. I also made a change to the API to allow for named data types, because looking through the specs, it wasn't really clear what to call the specific data types or how to refer to them. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I added an Iona Registry for the data types as well, so that there was a point you could reference to and say, here's what a data type is, and here's where you go. In the same way that the blob draft has a reverse lookup that allows you to take a blob ID and convert from that through to find out where it's referenced from. I guess this Iona Registry's purpose is to allow you to take a data type name and from that reference back to see where it's specified. And certainly the big to-do here is implementation experience. I have not yet implemented this at all. I've only written it up, and I doubt anyone else has implemented it either. So I would like to do that, obviously, before it's submitted for publication. So the Iona Registry, unfortunately, looks quite unreadable in this text, but that's what we've got on this slide. It has the name of the data type, core, push subscription, mailbox, thread, email, etc. Whether you can use it to reference blobs, which is the purpose of this particular draft and whether you can use it for state changes, which is something that's specified in core, but it's kind of underspecified. It says that these data types can be sent, or these keys can be sent, but it doesn't specify precisely what the set of them is. And so certainly as more data types get added, the question of whether they can be used as part of a push subscription object or not matters. And so this has now been changed to use the same shape keys that the push subscription does, where it maps there from a key to a state value. And in this, it maps from a key to an array of blob IDs, or an array of IDs, sorry, of that particular data type. And so in both cases, data type is the value of the keys in that object hash. So the questions I have for this group, I guess, is, do we think this Iona registry is necessary or not? It's when I raised this to Neil, at the time I was writing this, we weren't really sure whether it was necessary or not, so I thought we'd discuss that here. Particularly since data types are defined by the capabilities, and there's already a registry for capabilities, so you can always map through that way. But the terminology for data type and defining what a data type is in the JMAP context, I think, does need to be handled. And also, do we need limits? Yeah, the blob set and Cyrus IMAP and particularly blob get and Cyrus IMAP Ken is it's going to be a two-stage process. Going to have to define the new blob lookup API and then convert our middleware code to use that, and then we can get rid of the blob get that's currently there. And certainly I didn't put slides in here that show the concatenation syntax, but the idea is that it's a list of source objects, and the source object is either a blob set value with just the raw text. Yeah, go for it, Ken.
Regarding your first question, I don't know if we need it, the registry per se, but I think it's definitely useful to have one place where you can find all the various data types, especially considering that push uses the data type names, whether it be via WebSocket or just over HTTP. Cool.
I reckon probably let's not bother with the queue, given how few people we've got, unless things get out of hand. Just turn on your microphone and start chatting, I reckon.
Sure. Okay. I was going to say the big question of the registry for me is whether you actually need to forbid duplicate data type names. Now, probably mostly that's not going to happen anyway. But the kind of the capabilities is, if you have a duplicate name, obviously you can't use those capabilities both at the same time. But maybe that it's in a completely different context that would never overlap with this, but it's still just the right name for that, and like you don't want to forbid it. I'm not sure about that. I'm just saying that's kind of, other than that, is the registry to prevent duplicate names, or is it just to provide you the lookup to give you this information?
Yeah. All right. I think probably what I want to do, and I might have to ask Iona whether this is something that they handle nicely, is allow duplicate keys in the
you can allow it because you'd say the key is the data type name plus capability, I guess. Basically, that's your
the uniqueness key. But in terms of display, whether Iona is happy to allow that and how they sort it in that case.
I mean, you could probably sort it by capability.
Cool.
It might be. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I was under the impression that one of Iona's main tasks was to prevent duplication, so they might have a problem with that. But I shouldn't speak for them.
Yeah, I will email Iona and ask them to take a look at the draft. I'll add some additional text to the draft. Are you taking notes on this? Yeah, I see.
Yes.
There. Yep, cool. Great. Yep, so yeah, I will ask Iona to take a look at the draft once I've updated some text to basically say there may be duplicates here, and that's fine. It just means that you can't use the two capabilities
it's more
together.
The uniqueness constraint is capability plus data type name, and if the same data type name appears in two capabilities, you cannot use those two capabilities together. So if if you're defining new capability, make sure it's, if it does clash, it's not something that you feasibly want to use together, which is perfectly fine and plausible.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a new version of the same.
Absolutely, it can certainly be a new
almost.
version. Yeah, yes. If you have like mail 2 as a replacement, then it's, you know, it's, yeah, that was the kind of point.
Cool.
Capabilities as well.
So the question then, I guess, is whether we want to split this into 2 documents, one of which creates this registry and one of which adds Blob. I guess that may be a question for our area director. If he wants to.
Why would you necessarily create a separate draft just to create a registry? Can't it be in the same one?
Yeah, I'm sure it can. It's just a matter of where to look for the description of the registry. I don't know what the preferred. I guess that's something I can ask Iona as well.
Iona consideration section.
Yeah. Cool. All right, I will do that. And the other question is whether we need limits. Certainly maximum blob size feels like something we might need.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that's already handled by the upload limit or whether it needs to be a separate.
It would. There's well, actually, it's separate. It's max request size, I suspect, and it's probably a combination of both. You'll certainly want to document how the limits interact, I suspect, with this.
Yep. Yeah, there's max size upload, which
so you're going to get hit by max size request because you're actually making because you're passing this inbound and API, so it definitely has to be within that.
Yep, but if you're concatenating
your
multiple blobs together, then it may be that you're not actually transferring much data, but you might be creating a large blob as a result.
Yeah, that either needs to be subject to max size upload, or we need a separate capability for it. Possibly a separate one makes more sense.
Yep.
I suspect so.
Cool. All right, I will look into that as well. So for sure, I'll be doing an update to this spec. And that's all I've got for Blob. I think apart from that, everything is pretty good. They probably need to put something in. Yep.
So I have another question on this. So I think is it all one capability at the moment? Because the set and get are going to be very straightforward to implement. I think anyone that has JMAP stuff, and I guess you might as well if you want to as an alternate so you can do stuff in band if you really want. Whereas lookup is potentially very different and much harder.
Yeah, maybe
quite
it's not,
expensive. But it's going to depend on your implement. Yeah, it's depending on implementation. So I can see wanting to have those, but without lookup potentially. So maybe they should be separate capabilities.
Cool. It feels like maybe it needs both a lookup capability that's separate from the get set capability, and also an error code for unsupported data type. So lookup may not work for all data types, even if it's supported. And maybe a thing in the capability response
list the data
that says which data types are supported.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I guess. What's the utility of this also aiming? Like, it's mainly for kind of more for debugging purposes, isn't it? At least that's what we've.
So we're using it in middleware proxy for access control. So you can do a lookup and say which mailboxes is this blob ID accessible through to decide whether to display it or not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think a separate capability makes sense. It's quite separate really to the others, even though they just both happen to be things on blobs.
Yeah. Does it have to actually be its own separate capability, or can it just be an option within the capability object for blob? Just a Boolean.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it could just be the list of data types. Like, if that's empty, then you can't.
Yep.
Do anything, right?
That seems like a worthwhile. Yeah. So you ask for the capability, and yep.
Yeah, null if it doesn't support any type of lookup, or otherwise a list of the data types you can do lookup for.
Yep.
Yeah, that would work.
That works. Cool. I mean, the server can say unsupported data type regardless, or unsupported method if it's called and it doesn't support it. So
Well, yeah, but it shouldn't like unexpectedly return unknown
yeah,
method when
it's more
said
if the client just blindly tries it. There's a sensible error code regardless, but certainly the server should/must specify what it supports correctly. So we'll define that. Awesome. I've got work to do, and I think that's roughly the time we had allocated for this anyway. Next on the list was this JMAP SMIME Advanced. It's not that advanced. It's very, very simple. It's basically adding 2 keys to email set that say, please do the SMIME, and then the responsibility is on the server to know what your keys are and how to do the SMIMing. So it is quite simple. I don't know whether we want to.
Yeah, I think the name might, the
change,
capability
but I
might
guess
actually be, yeah. I suspect,
So-
yes, it's not really quite right.
Yeah.
That's not
But
hugely
it
important,
looks-
but yeah.
Yeah. So I suspect we'll discuss that. So I'm going to do a call for adoption to the mailing list straight after this. And obviously people can comment in the responses to that.
Yeah, I mean, Alexi's not here, so probably better to put us on this, but the interesting thing perhaps here is because it's going to change the body structure that you pass in, it should probably be returning what the new body structure is in the creative response. I don't know. We'll put it in discussion. That's
Yeah.
what we would that's the kind of what the core spec says you would normally do here.
Yep. Cool. All right. I've never been on the receiving end of this, but when I mouse over to see the additional slides, I assume you can still just see the slide. That slide, you're not seeing anything as I mouse over the rest of this.
No, I think we just see the current
Cool.
slide.
All right. So next up is JMAP calendars. So I'm going to switch slides.
Okay, so I've published a small update overnight, but it's mainly just it doesn't have any semantic changes. It's just fixing some making some things a bit clearer. We're getting some implementation experience on this now, not quite as much as I'd hoped to have by this point. We should have a full experience of it by the next meeting. And mostly the spec seems to be holding up pretty well. It's quite nice, actually been quite a while since I wrote a lot of it and that I'd forgotten a lot of stuff. And so I was actually having to look things up in the spec and finally answer them, which is always good. But there are definitely some edge cases, which to be honest, are not very well handled in CalDAV either at the moment. But it would be great if we could define properly how to handle. So just a few things I'm hoping we can get some discussion on. If we go to the next slide, please.
Cool. Do you want to try asking for slide control? Because I think you can just
Oh yeah,
click the slide control button and I can give you control.
What's that? And then that's share slides. Where's the slide control button?
Should be the second button.
I see one that asks to share slide. Okay, is that the ask to share slides? That one?
Yep. So, okay. So what has to happen is that I stop sharing slides, and then I grant to you, and then you can pick your slide deck from there, and now you've got control. Awesome.
I see. Got it. Yeah. Cool. All right. So here's an interesting case, which is you're invited to a recurring event. So let's say it's because every day from Monday through to Friday of the week. And you can't go to Wednesday, but you're going to the rest. So you RSVP, yes, for the general recurring event, but then you delete the Wednesday one out of your calendar because you're not going, you don't want it. This is something you can do in CalDAV at the moment. It's something you can do in Google Calendar at the moment. I've checked. I haven't checked other things. However, it's pretty broken in a lot of situations. It would be nice to define what should actually happen. the issue is if the organizer then updates the event again and sends you the update, then your server's going to apply this update, and it's going to see there's this there's no longer a cancellation on Wednesday, because it doesn't know that it was you that cancelled it necessarily. And so we'll often add back the event into your calendar, and that happens quite a lot. I'll have to check more providers, but that seems quite common. So I think there's a couple of options to handle this better. One is that so we have this excluded true property in JS Calendar, which is added to the recurrence overrides to say this recurrence is excluded, like next date. We could add an extra property to say something like participant excluded, or some other name, say it was the user that deleted it, not the organizer of this event. So if you get an update, it still keep this one deleted. Another option is just to forbid it. You could just say the user should actually just say or RSVP as no for that particular instance, and the calendar user agent will generally hide those events anyway, so it comes to much the same for the user. And you could have it so if the user click delete, actually they just send an RSVP no, or maybe some other options. So I'm interested if anyone has thoughts, ideas, comments. Did I explain that well enough? Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I've got one. I don't remember how CalDev handles this, but if the change to the recurring event was something like a rescheduling of it, that the invitee is now able to attend, doesn't the invitee want an opportunity to accept the thing that they'd rejected, that they declined before?
This isn't a...
Yeah, so if they... Okay, when you go, Mike, and then I'll go.
Well, the protocol's immaterial, isn't it? It's the point is that you probably shouldn't be deleting the instance as an attendee. It's like deleting removing the description or changing the time or anything. There are things you can't do to the event because you don't own it. The organizer owns it. And when they send another copy, they're going to overwrite what you made as local changes. So I think the one you've got on the screen at the moment is the appropriate way to deal with it. Is don't let them do it. And it's nothing to do with CalDAV or JMAP or anything else. It's to do with how you handle the data model.
Sure, I think yes, forbidding it is perfectly reasonable. So we define that as one of the things that you have to be the owner to be able to do. As I said, the kind of why I'm raising this though is, as far as I can tell, most existing calendar systems do allow you to do this. It's just perhaps they're all wrong, which is perfectly possible. They're all wrong in many respects, I've found, when you start testing edge cases. But
I seem to remember this being raised
that's actually definitely the simplest solution is to forbid it.
I think so, and the calendar application is always free to hide the things that you've chosen to. And
most do by default. Will hide.
Yeah, and the fact is, once you've cancelled, you should stay cancelled. Even when the organizer changes something, they shouldn't be uncancelling you.
Yes, that's why you have to record something. If you do delete it, that's why I'm suggesting this other participant exclude or something. Because otherwise it's okay. So that sounds like declined is perhaps the better option. So, as I said, it's certainly the easier option. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
To do is to reset the part stat to I can't remember the exact term, but basically request it again. So the organizer can re-request you. Yeah,
if the organizer then updated it to needs action, it would appear back in your calendar. But you presume that the organizer won't do that unless they reschedule it, which answers Jim's thing of if they do reschedule it, you do want it to appear back in your calendar potentially.
Yeah. So again, so long as the protocol allows for things and there's enough advice there to suggest the right behavior, then we should be good.
Yeah, a lot of this is specifying the advice, because it's reusing existing protocols, except that no one uses them right because they're terribly specified and no one understands them.
For what it's worth, I agree that declined is the correct way to go anyways. I think we're blurring the line between delete and declined here. I know, like with Apple Calendar, if I delete a specific instance, that gets translated to a declined when it goes back to the server. You're not actually physically removing the component. You're just basically stating, I'm not going to this particular instance.
Okay, I see a broad consensus here then for decline and forbid the user from deleting stuff if they're not the owner, like individual instances, which sounds reasonable to me. Any other comments on that? I'll move on to the next one. Nope. Okay. Okay, here's another edge case. So we have a permissions model which separates whether you can update your own events versus update all events.
I just want to raise one thing with the previous situation, which is that what you can do as a participant is basically fork off a new override that's not in the original event, because you're overriding your attendance to a particular event, which is not part of that. It's not a
That's right.
Not a separate override for the
allowed.
organizer until your update comes back. So you can still create new updates.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, I agree. This was just about explicitly deleting occurrences, so they're SNE excluded. Yeah. Okay, so yes. Basically, if you have permission to update your own events but not other events in the calendar, should you be allowed to update that event such that you are no longer the owner? Because at that point, you can no longer update it further. For example, you can't even undo what you just did, because at that point you don't have permission to. So should we forbid you from doing that? Is essentially the question. And if we do, we probably need to split. We have this general may add items at the moment, but we probably need to split that to mirror the update and destroy. So you can may add own, you can add events that you have permission to, that you can own, and may add all, which means you can add everything. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Doesn't this seem like a similar issue to the recurring thing, where you've got an event that is on your calendar that someone else offered, and if you're updating it yourself, then you're kind of breaking that.
No, this is
that relationship.
Other way around. This is something you were the original organizer, you created it. But suppose you have, if you have a shared team calendar, you might have that a number of different people within your team can update that calendar, but they can't update events they didn't organize. But you might want to transfer ownership, so you can say, I used to own this, but now I'm leaving, so I'm going to say someone else does. Now you could add those as a second owner with JS calendar in this, but can you remove yourself as well? It's not. I think there is a use case for that, but I can also see people getting into situations that are hard to undo if they make a mistake.
Is it possible to run into a situation where there's no owner any longer, or is that forbidden?
That is possible, but if there's no owner, then may update own allows you to update it. May update own is I can update it if I'm the owner or if there is no owner, essentially.
Well,
So
you might
that's
transfer
less
it to an owner who's inactive.
That's definitely possible.
But I'm inclined to say that, I mean, it's fine if you can't undo it. Tough. I think the simple approach is I mean, we can give some warnings and say, you're going to relinquish control of this, and you better make sure somebody else can handle it. But if we start adding weird things on to try and we'll end up with something really complicated and no doubt broken. That it's simple. Just change the owner and let things fall as they may.
Fine. Then I think basically what we currently have works okay then.
It's the same kind of thing that we used to have in I've had that in file systems where you change the ownership of a file. I mean, once you've changed it, you've changed it. you don't have access to it anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, the one thing that you can always do is delete it entirely from your calendar and create a brand new event if you break it that badly.
Well, that also depends on permissions here. But so for all your personal calendars, you will probably have may update all and stuff. Like the client will probably restrict you from changing things in events you don't own that you shouldn't. But yes, it does let you delete it. This is primarily going to be of importance in internal shared calendars where you can enforce stricter permissions.
In which case, you may need to go to the person who has admin privileges on the calendar and confess to your screw up and ask them to please clean up for you. Yeah, fair enough.
Yes, you presume someone has admin rights to go in and clean stuff up when people screw up, but generally the restrictions are helpful.
Or a hammer.
People doing stuff.
Go smash the server.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on that? I will move on. No? Okay. Final thing I wanted to discuss today was concept of default identity. So you have participant identities, which define who can be you in a calendar, rather than just have one. We have multiple. People often have aliases. Your full name at example.com and maybe just your first name as well, both email addresses that get to you at your company, and someone can send you an invite via either, and so the calendar needs to know that either of those are you. When you're creating new scheduled events in your calendar, though, you probably want to default to a particular one rather than be prompted every time. Now, this could just be stored on a per client basis, and we don't need to synchronize this, in which case we don't need this at all. But if we do think it's worth being able to store that preference kind of in the server so that any client you connect automatically knows which one it should default to, then we store that somewhere. And where should we put that, essentially, is the question. We can just add a is default property or some name like that to the participant identity object. But then you've got to update like 2 at a time. You've got to set 1 to true and 1 to false at the same time. And you've got to make sure that exactly one has true, probably, which is all doable, but a bit of a faff. We could stick it on the capabilities object, but that's only really feasible if it's a read-only thing, which I don't think this should be. There's no reason why the user can't change their default. And then the other option is you have some reference on some other object, like the calendar preferences object. It has default participant identity ID and gives the ID, and then it's easy to update because you just change the ID that's set there. But we don't have any particular object like that right now. And is it worth creating a whole one just for this property? But maybe there'll be others in the future. Anyway, those are the options that I see. But if you have any other suggestions, let me know. Or if you have any
I would vote for the last one. I think this has come up before, that it would be useful to have somewhere to store. I mean, there's going to be more than one preference. There's more than one property.
Yes.
And at the moment, there is no standardized way to store and share that. So
I guess the question is, what other properties do we want to find? Like we have an object like this and a whole bunch of preferences kind of internally, like what day of the week do you want to start on and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I don't know how much those should be synchronized.
Well, I would think that you probably want them synchronized. I mean that.
I guess the client can always ignore them if it doesn't want to use the synchronized version.
If it wants to override them, but and you might well want different preferences per identity. So it is associated with a particular identity, isn't it?
Not most of them.
Essentially, I was thinking. I would have thought of it more in terms of which particular. An account.
Yeah, per account. Yeah, sure. Yeah, not per your identity, but yes, yeah. Each user obviously may have different preferences. Like, I believe the week starts on a Monday, but people in the US often think it starts on a Sunday, etc., etc.
No, yes, and the situation I was thinking of is that in my calendar application, I've got 4 or 5 different accounts displayed at once, and I might well want some different settings for each.
Sure, and this would work like this would be a per count object, so you'd have one in each. So yes,
Okay.
you would store
Is there
different default.
is there a color for a default color, for example, that would be an analogous sort of property?
Well, the colors at the moment defined on per calendar. But certainly, which one's your default calendar also is something we should store per count. So there's another one.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some of these. If you go through the CalDAV properties, that's essentially what's going on there, isn't it? Some of those are what you would think of as user preferences.
Yeah, for sure. Do you know off the top of your head which other ones are there? Actually,
no, there's a default scheduling calendar and things of that kind.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think if we went through with a list of the DAV properties, that would provide a good starting point for a and I thought for a long time it would be better to have that represented as some form of fetchable object, because then it's easy to re-represent it in different different protocols and downloading it as an object rather than having to do multiple fetches. I mean, it's what you see at the beginning of a CalDAV session. There's about a gazillion fetches of properties.
Yep, that makes sense to me. So yeah,
and the thing you've got then is that you can have an object that has its own last modified or whatever, so you can cache it.
Yep. Yeah, you could use the standard update with JMAP to have there been changes and not bother fetching it again if not. Yeah. Okay. Sounds like broad support for defining a calendar preferences object, and I'll have a look at the CalDAV list of props and see what other stuff we should be putting on there. Sounds like there actually might be a few things. Great, that sounds reasonable to me. Okay, those were the three things that I came across so far with implementation that I thought worth discussing. I said hopefully by next IETF we'll have done a full implementation on both client and server and seen if anything else comes up that we've noticed. And if anyone else has experience, please also post on the list or communicate in some other way. And hopefully we can look towards finalizing this document by the end of the year. I can't remember what the milestone is, but yeah, that seems plausible now. JS calendar's been approved and published. Okay, thanks everyone.
Great, thanks Neil.
Robert,
I think you need to unshare.
I got some
and then
things to discuss still. So I got 3 points. First is so calendar event query allows to expand recurrences, and for these we generate standalone instances or synthetic events, how they are called in this spec. I think we should make clear that calendar event changes, that these recurrences will not get reported in calendar changes. So if we have a master, what I'm trying to say is, if we have a master event, we will only report the ID of the master event in changes, and never for any recurrence instances that we synthetically generated. With the only exception. I thought we said that,
but yeah, I thought we already said that, but I'll confirm it if not and make it clearer.
Yes, because I do not see it specified in query, and I do not see it specified in changes.
Do we need a property on these synthetic events that says what the master event ID is?
Yeah, this is also what I'm wondering about.
The
common property would be the UID. So that should help, but still it's not telling. It's not telling
what the JMAP ID is, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a property that would make sense. Then you could use that to just invalidate all of those if you are asking the server to expand recurrences.
And the,
Yep.
I mean, the alternative, just for completeness, would be a relation parent-child. But I personally think that a parent ID would be the better choice.
Cool. I'll put an action for that.
Right. You had some other things, Robert?
Yes, two other things. The one thing being, the calendar role, the inbox role, is defined as the calendar where invites get put into. And this is currently optional. So it's possible to remove that role and or transfer to other calendars. The idea would be that to make this role, the inbox role, mandatory, and if the server supports scheduling, and the server can indicate this with an additional capability, because otherwise the issue might be that someone removes their inbox role calendar without assigning the role to another calendar, and then we have nowhere where to put the calendar invites in.
Yeah, I actually think if we're going to create this calendar preferences object we talked about just before, then we should move to defining this there rather than having the inbox role. This seems a better place for it to me. Again, for kind of the same reasons. It's easier to say, yeah, here's the default calendar to use for new events. Here's the default calendar for invitations, etc. On that.
So, and how would we deal with the fact that we do not necessarily require all implementations to support scheduling? So,
well, then we could allow it to be null if you don't support scheduling, I guess. Otherwise, it has to be defined as an ID of the calendar to use for invitations. It's the same whether it's, that doesn't really change whether you define it as the inbox role on calendars or a pointer to the ID of the calendar to use.
Yeah, I mean, the difference would be that if, in my opinion, the difference would be if the server has this scheduling capability, it will not be allowed to end up with no inbox role. Whereas if the calendar preferences object is mutable, and I guess it is, we still have the same issue that someone might just remove their inbox role without, and then they have, again, we have no idea what to do with their invites.
The server can enforce there must be one if it wants to and reject the update.
And I can think of reasons why you might want a situation where even if a server supports scheduling, it might allow certain accounts to run with scheduling disabled.
Yeah, so, definitely. I think what I'm trying to get at is if an account has scheduling enabled, it doesn't seem right to me to then allow the user to remove their inbox, right?
Well,
we wouldn't.
That doesn't need to be enforced by the protocol. The server could reject it, yeah. And if the server doesn't reject it, then the server's allowing you to turn off scheduling for your account.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we...
And that might be reasonable, yeah.
Cool. So as long as we can state that the server can reject it, that would be a perfect solution.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and the last question is not necessarily only related to JMAP calendars, but for calendar implementations in general. So we have these standalone instances of an event. So let's say you have a recurring event, but you do not have the main event with the R rule. You just get an invite to one of the recurrence instances. And I do wonder how current implementations are handling this. Let's say you got such an invite, you have it on your calendar server. Now later you get the main event with the R rule. What's going to happen with the standalone instance? Is it merged or
just gets subsumed into the you'd sort of throw it away and replace it with the incoming one.
Yes, so the
Yeah.
master event is overruling whatever was there before.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that's what you do anyway. In effect, when you get an update to an event coming in any situation, you're essentially in at least when somebody else is the organizer, you're updating as a complete replacement. And
Yeah, this is a question.
But it can have another resource name in CalDev, for example, right? It can be two different things.
No, the server should reject that and find the resource with the same name. Should say that you can't have two instances with the same UID.
I think also that the server should
essentially
do this. I wonder if it's allowed to not do this, but it's
no,
not according to CalDev.
No.
No, and
Because the
JMAP calendars as well. You can have an event with the UID and no recurrence ID, it's the master event, or you can have multiple events with the same UID, and all of those must have recurrence IDs. You have been invited to one or more particular instances of an event, but you can't have both at the same time. If you then get invited to the master, you remove all of the individual things and you put all the data into the single master event at that point, which is mainly a problem for the ITIP handler, because it needs to make sure it preserves any alerts or other personal things that you set on those instances when it copy them into the master event it sets. But
okay, great. That's also how I would expect it to work. So that's
right.
Right?
Yep.
Good. These were all my points.
Cool. I will stop sharing slides then.
All right. Thank you, Joris. Do you want to try sharing your slides?
I'm gonna try. How does that
Yep, I just need
work?
to grant you access. Done.
Okay. That's nice. Cool new feature. Okay.
Yeah.
So for us, for JMAP for tasks, not a lot has happened since the last interim meeting, but yeah, for us personally, quite a lot has happened since last IETF at least. Mainly I dumped the changes that happened since last IETF in here. What we did is we changed the sort order. We added sort order to the task object. No, wait, that is actually Then we added. Then we made sure that a task can only belong to a single task list. We remove the isVisible attribute and adjusted the UTC properties for tasks. So since then, not a lot has happened. We're currently collecting implementation experience with various JMAP specs. What's also still ongoing is the discussion we had last time at IETF and the interim meeting about server capabilities, where we still need to publish the survey about various task systems. Yeah, that's basically it from my side. And of course, we would also be happy to hear if somebody already collected some experience with JMAP for tasks.
Cool. Anyone else have anything here? Do you have any asks from the group as well, I guess? Other than the what experience have you collected?
You mean if I want to ask something, or?
Yeah, is there anything you want us to do, want everyone else here to do for this at the moment?
No, not right now. I think next time we will present a bunch of notes and experience that we have collected, but it's not in a very finished stage yet. So for now, I don't have any further points.
Cool.
I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right. Anyone have any questions? Let me turn this back on just so I'm not videoless.
I don't actually have any questions right now, but I will make sure I review it again before the next meeting. And if you, looking forward to hearing about your implementation experience with that as well, which you said you'll hopefully have by then. I think the server capabilities research was also important. I seem to remember discussing that last time, just to kind of get a good sense of how broadly this is likely to cover the use cases that people seem to have.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. In that case, shall we move on to contacts?
All right. So for contacts, we basically updated the drafts with the feedback we got from last IETF and the CalConnect interim. So in that regard, we don't have as many points open anymore as before. So there's just a couple of things that we might want to discuss today. First one is more an FYI. So we discussed how to localize content in JS Contact already at last IETF and during the interim, and there was the preference of the most participants who raised their voices were in favor of reusing the same localizations approach as is done in JS Calendar. I asked on the mailing list about a week ago, and we'll wait at least one more week for further feedback, what people's opinions are on this. So far, people who raised their voices again were in favor of localization. So as I said, I'm going to keep this for one more week, but if there is no discussion evolving around these two or any other option, then in my opinion, this means we have consensus by the people who have an interest in how it should look like. Just another minor thing is that we currently do not use this special type property to indicate the object type within a JSON object. So for example, the type would be address for an address object, obviously. We intend to add that for all object types that we define in JS Contact. Except if someone is not in favor of this, please let me know. And then there is two items that I got feedback quite a while ago already, but we haven't started to address this yet. So I'll take the opportunity to do this now. So the first is that there was the request to be able to track metadata per field being a property. So for example, if you have a name, if the name property is whatever value, somehow one wants to track when was this specific property updated, in contrast to when was the whole contact updated. Now I do not have all the details on the exact use cases that are intended to be supported by this, but basically, not saying that we necessarily should do this, but if we want to do this, I think this could be done rather easily with patch object paths to a metadata object that then defines the properties one wants to track in them. But I'm asking, I'd like to ask now in the group if there is some use case, if you would also see this useful, or if you have an opinion, or if you have no opinion at all.
This has been raised a number of times, both for calendar data, I think, and for contacts, as the idea of having some sort of standard audit trail of some kind. So you can tell what happened to so you can tell what happened to the object and standardize so that different clients can display it. I mean, it's been raised, like I say, been raised a number of times. So there's a fairly steady desire for that.
This is not an audit trail though, because if you updated the same property twice, you'd only have when was it last updated, not it was updated this point.
Well, no, in that form it would be. But if you attached a change log to the object, it would become an audit trail.
Yeah, like I certainly agree. This should be a separate property, I think. So again, probably most things don't need this, and they can just ignore it. A change log is in some way more interesting than the field metadata thing. So yeah, kind of a little history.
Yeah, but so would you propose a reverse changelog, Mike? Basically, apply this patch to get back to the previous version and so on?
And a timestamp, yeah. Possibly who did it.
Yeah, I mean that was the I mean the point that the reason people want to know how an event or whatever got to the state it's in, and I have the same problem with every so often somebody will raise that with our public event system. You'd like to know who, so you can do that by trawling through your own logs and extracting stuff, but it makes a lot of sense to attach it directly to the event or to the contact, and then simply have it displayable. And it's a relatively simple thing to implement, I would have thought.
Yeah. I mean, your two options are basically keep the entire history just full copies, or do some kind of patch.
Yeah. In fact, there's already a model defined for that in CalDAV sharing, isn't there? Because it has the notifications
in JMAP sharing, you mean?
Well, no, there's one CalDAV sharing. There's a change reporting mechanism, and it's actually used. The same thing is used by the Apple Calendar application to show that what the changes are to a shared calendar. If an event changes in a shared calendar, the only thing it's missing is it's not actually attached directly to the changed object. It comes through as a separate notification stream.
I'm in favor of allowing some kind of previous versions history of reverse patches. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, like I can see. Yeah, I guess in the JS contact you just define that as a property of obviously it could exist, and then something like JMAP contacts, you might say this is actually only server set, so it can't be faked by the client or stupid stuff, and the server obviously might truncate it after a certain time as well, so you don't keep unbounded history, or it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And you probably have to explicitly request it. It's not like one of the default fields that would be returned. It all makes sense to me, but the general idea sounds interesting.
So when we already discussed also about calendar events, it seems to me that this is not a field that we should add just to JS contact. So rather we might want to define a extension RFC that can then be reused in both the JS calendar and JS contact and other object types probably.
Yes. And
that would make sense to me.
Yeah. And there is, as I say, there is you're sort of tracking changes, but the same data format can be used to report changes, and so you've got that for implemented in shared calendars. You want to report that an event that you have in a shared calendar has changed for some reason. It's also useful when you get an updated. Well, part of the reasoning is that it's sometimes difficult to figure out what actually changed in this event. Something got changed, but you can't quite see it.
We have that in JMAP calendars, like much like the calendar one you're talking about. It keeps a record of what change, any changes that you didn't make.
Yeah, but it's sort of the same.
It's the same thing, but yeah, in fact, it is. Yeah, just attaching it to the event as well as an option. Because
so I think
it's a patch.
So we should look at those at the same time, and rather than invent something completely different, perhaps just something that's multi-purpose.
Yes. Okay, great. The other item that I got approached with was the request, or was the idea to allow this to allow providing the for the same contact from multiple sources a unified view. It's actually written there now. I see it. So basically, if you have your contact Bob from X and vendor X and Y,
that's purely a client thing. That's not a data format thing. The only thing in the data format is, I guess, the UID, which I think we already have, right? So you can say this is for sure the same data, same thing, because it has the same UID. Clients may also try and do it based on other stuff if it can't link up UIDs, like, which is going to be less reliable. But I don't see how this is a data format thing.
Yeah, that's my view exactly. I just wonder if someone has used this differently.
The tricky bit is where to write updates to if you try and edit it, I guess.
Yeah. But again, that has to be a client thing in some way. Like,
well, that's what the Apple client does, isn't it? It presents a unified view.
Yeah, but I think it's the client, then the client implementation that does it. It's not really in the V card or something. I would assume.
But they I mean, I think that's probably what the thought was. They wouldn't be able to replicate that behavior. But yeah, I don't think there's any data format changes needed.
Yeah. No,
other than that, maybe you need. I mean, the one thing that maybe would be useful is some indication of what the actual source is. I don't think that is in there, is it?
Can we let Joris speak, because he's been trying a couple of times now?
Thanks. No, so I understood it that you wanted. I think the concept is interesting, and I understood it that you wanted to use the UID for mapping, but UID is, as I understood it, randomly generated. So there could be, like, I don't know, clashes between different sources. Or I don't know.
No, it's meant to be a UUID, so it should be very, very unlikely that you have a clash unless it is actually the same object that's available on a different source, because, like, you uploaded your contacts to different places and have edited it in one of the places, now they're a bit different.
Yeah, then it should be fine.
Yeah, the big danger is you've had it in different systems and you've edited them to be completely different things over time, because users don't know what the UID is under the hood, and they just copy an object and edit it randomly without realizing that it's cross-linked. But yeah, unlikely.
Yeah, nothing's infallible, but it's probably your best option. But regardless of how you try and decide whether they are the same to merge the display, this is a client concern, not a data type one.
All right. So thanks for that. This is all I got, or Mario, I don't know if you have additional points.
I don't have any additional points on this one.
All right.
Okay. Any actions out of this one?
Yeah, so this field metadata approach seems to have gotten interest. So I'd say we can start defining this under the umbrella of the JS contact work, but as we said, it should be object type agnostic. Yeah, I can write something up in the next time, but the main focus will be JS contact until we got that defined and done properly.
Cool. Thank you. All right. The next thing that I have in here is the large email problem, which is actually a large object problem in general. So does anyone want to talk about anything else before I pull up the slides that I gave at dispatch and talk about that? Not seeing anyone jumping up. Anything in the chat? Just Murray. Cool. All right.
I'll take over the minutes here.
Thank you. So these are the slides that I gave at dispatch the other day. The problem statement's pretty obvious. We've all seen this. End users want to send big files to each other as emails. Also, they want to attach large files to calendar events and possibly also attach large files to contacts. At the moment, that's generally a high-resolution photograph, but who knows, in the next couple of years, people might want to attach a video of themselves with the other person to a contact. And at that stage, it is certainly not something that you can fit inside the kind of size that we want to serialize our things to. So a general way of referencing a large object in a way that it needs to be reference counted somehow, kept alive along with the object. I don't know if you've seen the discussion on the dispatch mailing list since Monday. There's been a bit of pushback at the idea that this is something we can even do. So we'll see there, but certainly for JMAP, this is of interest to all our data types, and tasks obviously are also going to want to be able to link to large files. So we all care about this. I took some screenshots of myself emailing large files around, and with Google Drive or with Gmail, it uploads to Google Drive. It appears as a recent document in Google Drive, so it messes with all your history and all sorts of stuff. With iCloud, again, it winds up being stored on their server, in this case just for 30 days before it gets deleted, and the attachment is just a reference to, it's a link inside the HTML body of the email. And with Outlook, exactly the same thing again. You upload it, it gets stored in your storage drive at the source, and then a link gets emailed. So the problems, obviously, the upload of large files. You want to be able to restart and upload. JMAP doesn't have any solution to this, and that really is an issue for HTTP. So I'm going to be talking to the chairs of the HTTP BIS working group and see if if they have work in that area already, or if it's something that we need to talk to them about getting done. The big question is the ownership or responsibility for the data. Who is responsible for keeping a copy of this data and keeping it online for the lifetime of the object? This particularly matters with calendar events where you have managed attachments. Who's responsible for keeping that attachment alive? If you invite someone to an event, the organizer being responsible kind of makes sense, but if you're sending out something that's supposed to be a long-lived calendar event that's not an invitation, then who's responsible for keeping that copy? Likewise with contacts, often contacts get transferred around. Who keeps that original copy? And partly we're looking at globally addressable data in some way here that you can have multiple copies, and I'm happy to discuss possibilities here. It kind of feels like the thing that almost BitTorrent is good at here, where you have some kind of key that specifies the data, but then there's privacy considerations around that as well. And the third bit was specific to existing email formats, which is the discoverability or embeddability, which is basically saying here's an attachment, and does this attachment have the data embedded in it, or does it have a reference to data embedded in it? Either way, you need to be able to see that this is an object that's supposed to be with the email, with the email contact calendar, whatever, rather than just a link to some external content. Yeah. So, sorry.
So can we? And there, I think there were some more problems that were brought up also, like privacy. Yeah. You know, the discovering, something about the recipient of the message, and modification of things, and so-called compliance issues.
The modification thing, I was really annoyed with that, because the whole point is that you put a cryptographically strong digest in the attachment or in the message itself, saying here is something that allows you to confirm that the content that you get matches the content that you were told you were going to get.
Okay.
That is a pretty
it's
solved
an easy
problem
to solve then.
Yeah. That is very easy to solve. You just require that there's a digest, or even a couple of different digests with a couple of different algorithms included in there for whatever level of. I mean, it's not 100%, obviously. If someone finds a way to break SHA-256, then maybe we've got problems. But specifying that, I think, would be fairly
bigger
solid.
Problems then.
Yeah.
We have bigger problems if they do that.
Yeah. So, yeah. The other question is, where is the copy sent and ref counted? Again, this is much more solved if you send the digest of the content along with your email in a way that the recipient system can reliably extract and see that this is a reference to some external content and where to get it from, because the recipient server can then download and cache a copy, or people's individual clients, even if you even phones these days have enough storage on them that 10 megabytes is pretty small. You could have your local email client pull a copy and cache it locally along with your email archive. Your POP3 client download a copy as well, so long as you can tell that this is a resource and has an ID, and ideally some kind of globally unique ID, which the digest is sufficient in some ways for that. Whether you need a separate global ID as well, then I'm not sure there. So that's a thing that I think is worth discussing. But certainly within the FastMail system, we still use SHA-1 as our global ID for a lot of stuff, and it works just fine. It's not really broken for anything other than some very explicit cases. Yeah, because right now, as I said in these slides, if you can read it at all, in this, it's just got an href to an external file. There's nothing in it that identifies it as this is supposed to be attached content. Thanks, Ned. Cool. We'll look that one up. So ditto all of these. And yeah, arbitrarily following links from emails is dangerous for a bunch of these things that has side effects, content can change, etc. But a lot of that is more solved if the recipient server is going and fetching the data immediately so that it can virus check it, and then keeping it alongside the email as well, or alongside whatever the other object is that's coming in. because you can tell that you got the same object because the digest must be with it, and you've got the response. Your recipient server has the responsibility. As Ned's saying in the comments in the chat here, you can't guarantee anywhere near as much as you can if the content is all kept together. But the question is, has enough changed since this was done back in RFC 1000 series that more systems are more likely to support this? Because clearly people are working around it. Every big email system now dumps the file and sends a link to it, and at least something more structured and discoverable would be better than what's happening now. So my proposal was something like this. Yeah, go for it. Hans-Jörg. I'm not seeing sound yet, just seeing video. You need to click a separate button to turn on your sound. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, sending pieces and reassembling them would certainly work with sufficient IDs tied to them. Though, again, I would want a digest of the sum total of all of them. Yeah, go for it, John. Yeah, I think don't worry with the queue, just talk.
Okay. Is my microphone working?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, I agree. This is a problem that we need to solve because we have users saying like, why? Because we have users who are baffled that they try to email their 30-minute video and it doesn't work. But I really, yeah, I realize it seems crude and primitive to divide it into chunks and send them, but like that avoids all sorts of other problems like where is the data stored? We know, and
yep.
We have a proof of concept that it's worked in Usenet for 20 years. Although I realize Usenet's a little different, but it's still, you send the messages and you glue them back together. So, and the other thing is that I think that before this starts, like we need a whole document just to try to outline the threat model and all the horrible things that people will do once you can, like, I can send you 25 tiny little messages, each of which implicitly includes a 500 megabyte file. And like, what do you do with that?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's why I prefer the kind of model promise processing, which is more of a pull than a push model. Because if you're putting these in the messages still, if I'm understanding you right, John, then your recipient's got to deal with that huge amounts of data, like keeping it all in memory while it concatenates these bits, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it could, they could concatenate it to a file.
Sure, they can concatenate a file. What I mean is they don't have the option not, if they want that data at all, they have to keep track of it right then and there, and then you could easily fill up a user's quota. Whereas if it's kind of, here's a link with a digest, the server can fetch it immediately, which is better for privacy, but it can also balance that with, I'm not going to blow the user's quota because sender X has already sent me too much of this.
Yeah, no,
and
it would have a digest and a size, so the server could reject it upon receiving it because it can parse out what the size is going to be and say, no, I'm not going to accept that at all. Or it could even immediately fetch the content and virus check it before it accepts the mail, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is all part of why I would like to write down the threat model. I mean, the threat model, if you fetch stuff immediately and virus check it, sort of reduces to what we already understand. And the longer the gap between when you send it and when you look at it, the more interesting the threats are. So I'm looking forward to a lot of interesting work on this project.
Yeah, I think the important point for me is that the threat is going to be strictly less than what is currently the case with all these systems Bron just pointed out. Like, people are doing this whether you want them to or not. So almost whatever we do is going to be at most as risky as that, and probably less risky. And we just try and make it as good as possible. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, as Jamie suggests in the chat, the idea of sending a symmetric encryption key along with a reference in the email is a good way to allow the content itself to be sent across the wire separately, so nobody can do it. And you could key it on a double hash or something and need the single hash to request it. There's lots of different ways to do this, which I would definitely want security people to look at.
The thing that concerns me a little bit about the pull model is making it clear whether or not you actually have the message or not. I mean, I can picture a situation where somebody sends me a big PDF and I decide that I'm going to review it on the plane, and then I get on the plane and I don't have it.
That's already a problem with email clients in general, that they don't always download large attachments unless you explicitly configure them to. So that would, again, be a client configuration question.
Yeah, and again, compared to current systems of saying, like, the whole point is this gives it structure, so clients could do that. Whereas when they send just, a link in the HTML body, like for Google or Yahoo or all those examples, the client's never going to know about those, and so never can download it.
Yep, and the worst thing about it is that it puts all the responsibility for managing that attachment and the entire lifetime of that attachment on the end user rather than on their server, which I think is an obnoxious imposition on the end user. And it requires them to then back it up and maintain it and all the things that you would generally expect your server to be doing in every other context. And yes, symmetric key plus a digest that allows you to guarantee you've got the right bytes, as Ned's saying in the chat there, gives you the best of all these things. The sending server can virus check it, the recipient server can virus check it. They can tell everything. Yeah. And they can then cache the data and give it the same lifetime as the email on the server, so that you know that while you have that email, you also have the contents it references. And obviously, likewise, calendar events, contacts, all the things.
Yeah, I mean, there are potentially quota issues for that, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? There are potentially quota issues if the content is inside the email as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, I agree, Hans-Jörg, that standardizing the URL-based sharing is and standardizing a format for here is a link that you can use to get and validate that you have the right stuff and decode that stuff, which may need to be long-ish. Like it might need to be a couple of kilobytes of data to include the key and the digest and all the various bits and pieces. But if we standardize one of these things, the other question there is whether it is a specific URL or whether it is something that allows you to discover in some kind of BitTorrent-esque thing that can allow that message to exist in multiple copies and for you to pull from one of them. And there are obviously some privacy considerations around that. But how do you handle the URL mutating over time? Because you want to be able to download this message that you can still DKIM check or whatever as being unchanged bytes, and yet have updated the reference of where the data is stored. I guess you talk back to the same server that you got it from, and it can rewrite it. Yeah, cool. So we might be able to whack the whole thing in a JWT data URI or something, if the symmetric keys are short enough. Cool. We've still got half an hour, and we've got no other specific topics to cover. So I'm quite happy to be chatting about this, even though obviously this is probably not the working group where the work will happen. If we can convince dispatch to dispatch it somewhere, which I think we should be able to, because it's definitely a problem that everyone has, and there are worse solutions out in the marketplace right now because we're not doing something about it. All right, so my proposal is obviously pretty bogus, and but yes,
Well,
the
it's
problem
bogus,
the
but
problem
it's definitely some improvements.
the problem is real. Users are going to want to be able to transfer around videos.
Yeah, this is definitely worth solving because just telling users you can't do that, it's not doesn't fly.
They work around it. The email providers work around it, and they're working around it by a totally unannotated link inside an HTML email body.
Yeah, anything we come up with is going to be better than the current situation, pretty much.
Yeah, it does need to be backward compatible enough that it doesn't make the user experience significantly worse during the changeover period.
Yeah, I think it's quite straightforward. If you can make it so things that don't understand it think it's just another text HTML part to display, and then you can embed your pretty link just the same as they currently do at the bottom. I presume every client supports, displaying multiple parts that are together. I think they do.
Yep. You could also multi-part alternative it, such that the third alternative is one of these.
Yeah, but you'd have two versions of your body potentially. Then one that's not as nice. I think.
Yeah, you've already got two. Then you'd have three. But yes, plain text HTML and text HTML with one of these in it.
Yeah, no. If we can avoid that, that would be good.
Yeah. But yes, if the worst case is that it appears as an ununderstandable attachment, and you put a link inside the body to download it as well as one of these attached, that could work as well. All right. I don't think we've got anything else here at the moment, so I'm going to stop this slide share, and I'm just going to pop open the data tracker page so that we can have a look at our milestones. All right. So this is our milestone list at the moment. Obviously, we have passed a lot of these already. Blobs is adopted, so yay. I assume you're taking notes on this, Jim, so I'll just talk and let you note. Thank you. JMAP Civ has not yet been submitted to IESG. I think it's done. Ken, are you waiting on anything there, or should we just submit it?
I think there's actually was some feedback last IETF that I still have to incorporate in the draft.
All right. When do you expect we might
mostly surrounding the test method, and the other one was Alexi wanted to have the a query property to determine if one script was included by another one.
Yep. Cool. All right. So should we just update that to December 2021 for submit? Give 6 months to.
Yeah, I would like to get the draft updated and implemented by IETF112, and we can discuss it there, and then hopefully submit it shortly after.
Cool. Yeah, if we do a last call at 112, then submitting in December sounds right. Adopted document for JMAP access to address books. We haven't even started with that yet. So that might need to pop through to December as well if we, again, propose it at next IETF and do a call for adoption, then December would be right. Submit JMAP calendars. Likewise, we're thinking December, Neil?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we should have it pretty much finished by the next IETF if we get the implementation experience done. Mainly what's missing is just a bunch of examples and stuff, which will be a lot easier to do once we have a server we can copy and paste stuff out of.
Yeah, cool. And hopefully that should be done well by the next IETF, I would hope.
I would hope so.
Blobs, likewise, I think December seems right. If I rev it fairly soon after this, and then we get implementation experience before next IETF. JMAP quotas document. What was the status on that one? I don't even remember. I think it's basically done.
No, I think there were some issues.
No, hang on. That's the other way around.
You were thinking
IMAP
of
quotas is basically done. Yep.
Yeah. JMAP quotas had quite a few issues. I don't know whether they're still working on it. There was definitely sent a bunch of feedback. I'm not sure what's happened with that.
It hasn't been updated, so it's expired. There you go. All right. So that let's bump that off to early 2022.
Yeah, someone comes back into that.
So March 2022, I guess, or April 2022. So after IETF113. JMAP SMIME will be submitted in July 2021. I've got 2 days, maybe 3. It's ready to go. It just needs me to actually submit it. Likewise, adopt a document for SMIME key management will be August 2021, because I'll send out the call for adoption straight after this. Submit JS contact, Robert.
Earliest December.
December. All right, we've got a lot of stuff all planning to land in December. We're going to have to actually make progress this. What do you call a third of a year? Whatever it is. Trimester.
Quadmester? I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever it is, we need to get that done. Cool. All right. Submit a document with guidance. This informational document has still not made any progress. We don't seem to be keen to do that, but let's bump it once more through to April 2022. I'm sure we'll find some free time at some point. That is all I have on the agenda. Does anyone have any other business?
I just want to say that the drafts for converting iCalendar and vCard to the JS formats were very helpful for us. So we're actively using them, and they're quite nice. And yeah, just wanted to say, yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Well done.
They don't actually belong to this working group. They belong to Calext, but I will pass that on to the Calext chair, who is sitting right in this chair right here. One of them. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, if we have no other business, we get 25 minutes back to go do whatever we want to do. Jamie?
I think that's it.
There is a question in the chat. Jamie
All right.
Sharp asks, is this an appropriate occasion to ask if anyone in this working group is interested in a JMAP for feeds, e.g. RSS application?
This is my first IETF, so I'm not actually quite sure how these meetings work.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So what's who's the user for this? What's the use case?
There are a bunch of different RSS feed readers that have some sort of API for separating the portion of the code that goes out and checks, are there new updates in this RSS feed from the UI that lets you actually read those updates. So very much like mail. But as far as I can tell, none of the existing protocols have any facility for push notifications or any way for the client to maintain a local cache of any of the data. So you have to just pull and just re-pull anytime you want to see if there's anything going on.
Yeah.
So I think JMAP would be a really good fit for that setting.
I agree that JMAP, I think, is a perfect fit for this kind of thing. Like it's very similar kind of problem to mail. I think it would, in many ways, it's actually just a lot simpler. You don't have things like conversations or threads, which make things more complicated. So if people want to do this, I think it would be straightforward to do. I don't know. I guess it's just needing to find people that are interested enough to do that and see if they want to come propose it and adopt it.
Yeah, so I was hoping to find out whether there are people interested in that in the working group currently.
I'm interested in the abstract, in the idea of it. I think it's a great idea. Happy to review and suggest things for it, and certainly if you have people interested in implementing, that would be great. So, and very keen to have new people. So thank you for coming along.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I don't think that we have anyone here that's from kind of RSS products or world at the moment. But if they would like to come along, then yeah, I think this is certainly something that could fit within the working group if there's sufficient interest.
Thanks. Well, I think that's all I had.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. With that done, last call for other business. I'm hearing nothing. Enjoy the rest of your days. Enjoy the rest of your IETF. See you somewhere around. Or in November in virtual, probably Madrid.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. See ya.
See you, Brian. Take care.